Hi guys. So last week we talked a little bit about building frameworks and building off of those frameworks. And frameworks are great. They're a super helpful tool when it comes to drawing. But what happens if you have a figure that doesn't necessarily fit the mold of that framework? So what I have here is I have a couple of maybe irregular shaped characters, if you will, just meaning that they're not like your typical human anatomy-esque type thing. So with those frameworks we did, you could maybe modify them to do a Patrick drawing or even this Koopa drawing, but you may have some issues doing things like Simba here or Yamper. So what I want to do is I want to take a look at how we can use some other techniques to draw things such as these characters, which maybe don't necessarily fall under the realm of human anatomy. So what we're going to do is we're going to do kind of a geometrical drawing. So instead of using a framework, we're going to use shapes. So what we're going to do is we're going to break these different characters down into kind of basic shapes, and we're going to build off of those shapes instead of building off of a framework. Again, this is another very useful artist tool. This is a way a lot of professional artists work. So instead of, again, jumping right into the detail, we kind of step back and look at the overall drawing first. And just like we did with the framework, we work general to specific. So let's start off here. We'll start off with Yamper, who is this adorable little Pokemon. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna kind of break this down into bigger shapes. Now I'm not gonna do complete drawings here. All I'm gonna do is show you how to break these down into different shapes. We will kind of build off of those shapes in a later video. But for right now, let's just kind of see how this works. So if I'm gonna do this Yamper, what I wanna do is I wanna break him down into different sections or different shapes. So what I can do is I can look at the different parts of him and I can kind of see how these different parts and pieces might translate into basic shapes. So for his head, for example, we have basically a circle. So even though it's not a perfect circle, you have this thing happening here and his cheek juts out, we still have kind of a basic circle. So what I can do is I can just kind of draw this real basic circle here. And I'm not going to worry about messing up or messy lines or anything. All I'm doing right now is getting shapes down. So again, this is kind of like building a framework. For his body, I can break this down into pretty much a basic oval. Now, even though there are parts that kind of stem off of it and we have some other things, I'm still just going to kind of simplify and just make this into a basic shape. So far we have a circle and we have an oval. Now if I wanted, I could get this big yellow part in as well. That's kind of an, I don't know, smoothed out, almost triangular thing here. But again, I'm just sort of adding this. It's sort of almost like a gumdrop or a teardrop shape, something like that. And I'm just building this up by shape. Same thing with his ear. We have almost like another teardrop shape. And I'm not really worrying about any sort of details. I'm just putting these shapes in. So we have something like that for the ears. And then for his feet, again, I have just a couple more ovals. So oval, we see a tiny little bit of that one. I see another little oval. And another oval that's kind of cut off. His tail maybe gets a little bit more complicated. It's kind of like this lightning bolt. So I'm just gonna real briefly kind of sketch that out. And it's not perfect, and that's okay, because we'll go back in later, not in this video, but another video, and we'll fix things. So I notice his head needs to be a little bit bigger, so I can just make this circle a little bit bigger. I can even, if I want, throw a little circles, a couple circles in for the eyes. And then his mouth, even though it has this little point in it, it's still kind of just this smiley face thing. Okay, so I've broken this down, and here we can even throw his tongue on. I've broken this down into very basic shapes. I haven't erased things. I've just kind of drawn shapes on top of shapes. We have a very messy drawing here, but what I have is I have that basis so that now I can go in and I can start evolving it and start working with details, and we can look at that later. But I just want to show you this with a couple other figures. So Koopa, here's another one. We can do the same thing. I may want to start with a body on this one because his body, even though there's that shell, it's pretty much just a big circle. So I have something like this. And then his head, we can break this down a number of different ways, but I think what I want to do is I want to break it down into an oval this way, and then maybe some ovals for the eyes. So coming off of the body there, I get a big oval this way, and then I get maybe partial oval there and another one here. And again, this doesn't have to be perfect right away. We'll adjust these things as we go. But what we're doing is, again, we're just setting up a foundation. So I have his shell, you know, eventually I'll divide that shell up. His arms, maybe I just kind of focus on the fists at first. So I get a circle here and another circle here. And then I can add these little noodle arms on. Same thing for his feet. Maybe I just look at them as being sort of these big ovals for right now. And then I add those legs on, get like that little tail in. And then his wings, you know, they're kind of like wingling shape. So maybe I just do kind of like a little teardrop thingy there, and then part of one there. Again, I've taken this and I've just broken it down into the most basic shapes possible just to kind of figure out where everything is. So let's look at a couple more here. Maybe I should have started off with Patrick because he's a little bit simpler. But Patrick's real easy, and what we can do with Patrick is we can break him down into just one big teardrop. So he's kind of like this. So here's a big teardrop. And then with Patrick, it's pretty easy. All I have to do is just make these little ovals that are coming off of him. And he has pants and stuff, but we can do that later. And then these little shapes coming off for the arms. Throw some eyes on there. Maybe rough out a mouth, you know, and I can get this stuff in. So very basic shapes. And we'll take those basic shapes and then we'll modify them and turn them into more refined drawings. Simba, same thing. And Simba has a lot of different moving parts here, so he's a little bit more complicated. But again, if you have a really complicated drawing, we'll just break it down into more shapes. So we'll start off with his head. And then I have this little part coming off the bottom of his head where his mouth is. His ears, they're circles, they're just kind of cut off. So his body gets a little bit tricky. So what I would do for his body is I would get this upper part kind of drawn in, and then I'm just gonna create an oval here again for the base, and it just kind of comes out of this upper part. So I have sort of like an oval here and just some lines there. I'm not gonna focus on his legs just yet. I'm gonna just worry about his feet and where they are, because they're just kind of really stretched out ovals. So I got 2 feet like that. And then I can figure out how his legs attach. And then the front ones, maybe I just do something like this. Maybe I look at that hands and I get an oval in there for the hands. And then I just start working off of that. And again, I can throw some circles in for eyes. I can get kind of a basic little nose shape in. Maybe, his eyes need to be a little wider. That's fine. His tail's just sort of this big swoop here. And we go from there. So that's how you take kind of irregular characters and you break them down. So like I said, our framework isn't necessarily going to work for some of these characters. We could maybe modify it a little bit, but if you have really irregular shapes, you know, dogs, lions, things where that framework isn't going to work, what you can do is you can break them down into shapes. And that's just going to help you understand the structure of the character a lot better. And it's going to really help you draw it and draw it accurately. That's the key there, is that we want our proportions to be correct. We don't want the head to be too giant or an arm to be too long or thin. And you can remedy that by breaking it down into shapes and understanding how those shapes relate to one another. All right? Okay, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.